Hello, my name is Peter Sigurdsson. I'm going to be working with Professor Janelle in teaching you the upcoming courses, starting with Introduction to Web Technologies. So our first class is tomorrow, which is Monday. So we've uploaded some material up there into Blackboard. Just want to make sure you're familiar with it. Maybe take a couple of minutes just doing a quick scan over it. Right? You don't have to study it in depth, but if you at least make yourself a little bit familiar, that's going to kind of help you absorb it faster. So we have our PowerPoint here, and tomorrow we're going to be talking about what the web is, what some of the underlying technologies are, and some of the sort of wrapper context around it. Now, all of you have been working with web browsers and internet since, as long as you've been old enough to know what's going on in the world. So we're going to talk about some of the things that makes that work. What's a markup language? A little bit about some of the theory of language. And then our lesson plan for tomorrow is to start putting our hands on this and to start developing some web applications using HTTP, HTML, web browsers, and CSS, right? That's our goal. By the end of tomorrow's class, we want you to, and I'm sure many of you already do have a pretty good knowledge of this, but make sure everybody is on the same playing field in terms of building the HTML document object model and using cascading style sheets, right? And then in future classes, we're going to build up, we're going to put some JavaScript on top of that. One of the things that makes JavaScript quite powerful in terms of developing a web page is you can do a lot of your foundational structuring work in CSS and then use JavaScript to apply CSS. So let's just take a couple of minutes now to look at some of the things we're going to be working on tomorrow. So the basic things we're going to be working with in this course are as follows. Web browser. And on a test, you're going to get a question that's going to say, what is a web browser? And hopefully you'll remember that the answer is a web browser is a software application that can basically do two things. It can send out a URL. And we're assuming now that we have a working internet connection. We're not going to be spending too much time talking about TCP IP in this class, although you should know that information over that the TCP IP network, Transmission Control Protocol, Internet Protocol, is the network that connects internet endpoints, and TCP is Transmission Control Protocol, in which TCP frames or packets are conveyed over the wired or wireless connection. There's your data payload, and there is your to address and port, and from address and port, and you have these packets being conveyed over this TCP pipe. Now, this will get a little bit important when we are talking about forms, HTML forms, because in forms we need to provide an encoding type, which could be either post or get. And that relates to whether the information is conveyed from the browser to the server by URL rewriting or in the TCP pipe. Don't need to worry about that right now, but we will get into this stuff a little bit. But anyway, so you have your browser, which sends out a URL over this cloud of, if you ever get asked a question, you will not be in this class, but if you're asked what is the internet, you can say it's a topology, it's a collection of packet forwarding routers. So the TCP packets come into one router and they're routed around until eventually they find their destination, which is Facebook in the case of this example. And then Facebook is a server, so it's running another process now called a web server. So that's another piece of application software we're going to need to be familiar with. In fact, one of the things I'm going to ask you to do is set up your own local development environment, your own local server. And there's a couple of options. I mean, there's actually about a dozen or so out there, but two good ones are XAMPP, which is available from Apache Friends, which is great, except it does not work on Windows 11. The other option is MAMP, which you can get a 14-day free trial for, and that'll get you through at least the first couple of lessons of our course here. But if you don't have a server, you can still run all of the exercises by opening your HTML files as files in the browser, you can do it directly. If this were a class on PHP, for example, you could not do that because some processing needs to happen on the server side. In this case, our server is going to be a very simple thing. It's just going to serve up files from the file system. We're not doing any well, actually, we will be doing on the forms, but we'll get to forms later on. What I'm saying is you can get by without having a server, but it would take about 5 to 10 minutes to install one. And I think your experience of the class will be more satisfying. In a couple of minutes, I'll step you through setting up a server. But anyway, let's go back to this right now. So we have an application program called a web browser and another application program on another operating system called a server. So packets come in, the server responds on a certain port, and there's a TCP term we are going to need to be familiar with. We'll talk about it later. And then the port will respond by sending back a file. It's actually, there's two things the server can do. It can send back a static file, and that's what we're going to be doing in this course. In more advanced courses on web application development, you could programmatically generate a response, maybe by doing a SQL call to a database server. Like, for example, if you book a plane ticket on Travelocity or something from this airport to that airport, that's what they would do. So it could be dynamically generated as well, but not in this course. In this course, we're going to be sticking up here, which is static files. And static files can contain HTML and images and CSS and JavaScript. Those are all things we're going to be working with here. So anyway, that is the high-level overview of this course. Now let's look at for a couple of minutes here on the HTML page, because an HTML file is a text file in a file system. It is a document object model, and that's going to be very key, because if you understand right from the beginning what a document object model is, you'll be way further ahead much faster. So here we have the HTML document object model, and that consists of a document, which is the highest level of containment. And in a document, you can have nodes. You can have an infinite number of nodes, in fact. And in fact, an HTML document is a graph. It's a directed graph of nodes. And these nodes are reflected on the file, the HTML file, as tags. So that would be that would be open HTML and close HTML. It's very important you always keep your bracket balanced. And then within this highest level of containment, you could then have head, and then you could have body, which is where the content is. Body. And most of the interesting stuff is going to go here in the body. Now, you could put stuff in head. For example, you could put JavaScript libraries, as we will be doing. You could put CSS script. You could put that in your head. Why? Because often the content in the body will count on script from CSS or JavaScript. And if your user has a slow network connection, conceivably their page could start executing in their browser. If you were to put, for example, your JavaScript down here at the bottom of the body, some of your HTML content may execute before that JavaScript's available, and the page would look broken, so that's not good. So a customary practice is to put all of that in the head to make sure that it's available before the page starts rendering in the browser. And in fact, rendering is another important term here, because one of the things we say that a browser is an HTML rendering engine. It's actually other stuff as well, For example, how can we execute JavaScript in a web browser? Because JavaScript is executed by something called Chromium interpreter, because JavaScript is an interpreted language, right? A programming language can be compiled or interpreted. So in JavaScript, it's interpreted, write once, run anywhere. So here we have our JavaScript interpreter, Chromium, and that sits inside the browser. And that's why if you attach HTML scripts to your nodes, say for example, I have a node which is an image node showing a picture of a dog. Now that node has some attributes. Source is an attribute, for example, so I could use JavaScript to change the contents of this attribute. That's not for several days. We're not going to get to that in the first couple of days, but that's just to illustrate the concept that an HTML web page is a document. It's a document object model. It is a graph, and all of this stuff is in your PowerPoint as well. Please go and read it. This is just to give you some introduction. A graph of nodes. And web page execution works by traversing over these nodes, and CSS and JavaScript work because they are markup languages, and the browser has interpreters for JavaScript as well as CSS, and that's why you can dynamically change the appearance of your page by the fact that in the BOM, now here's another very important term. I've seen a lot of students study web development. They come out of their program, and then we ask them, describe the BOM, the browser object model. They say, what's that? It's a very important concept. In fact, it's so important that you have an entire worksheet dedicated to it in your prep materials for tomorrow's lecture. So if you want, you can go and take a quick look at the browser object model. Now, how does that work? Well, we've already said that an HTML page is an object model. In fact, it's a document object model. Why? Because all of the nodes in the document object model compose together to formulate a document. And hopefully, one of the reasons I'm making this video is because in class, we generally focus 70 or 80% or more of our time on code. And sometimes, students are so anxious and excited, they want to learn how to make the code work. It's a little bit difficult. I know when I was a student, I was like that, right? I just wanted to build electronic circuits. I couldn't really slow my brain down enough to listen to my professors explaining the theory. And later I sort of had to go back and retrain myself in the theory because I should have listened to it more at the beginning. So I want you guys to understand right from the beginning, this is very important. So what is a language? Now this is language in a general sense, like English language or any human language. And then we have languages in computer sense, like programming language. Well, HTML is a it's a page description language. And let's go and read through this stuff. I'll lecture on it tomorrow, but we're going to be talking about markup languages in this course, where they come from, how they work, and how they execute in the browser. So our course here is the study of markup languages with the particular emphasis on HTML, cascading style sheets, right? So HTML is like the structure. If you've ever worked in construction trades, maybe you built a house or something at some point. So the 2x4 wooden beams are the structure. You put those up and they're the frame, and then you clad them with bricks, and then you can put in some insulation and some drywall. So anyway, that's all the structural part. Now the cascading style sheet is the decoration. It changes the appearance. So things like the paint and the wallpaper and the curtains and the drapes and all that decoration stuff that goes on top of the wall, right? I can repaint the wall. The wall is the structure. That's not changing, but I can change the appearance. And then finally, JavaScript you can consider as being like electrical wiring or fiber optic cable. or some sort of wiring infrastructure that lets us manipulate the information states of the nodes, right? This stuff is all like Lego. If you've ever played with Lego as a child, these little plastic bricks you snap together. Once you understand that the basic conception, the basic component is a node, we're going to talk about that more tomorrow in some lab exercises, but an image or a table or a paragraph tag or an H1 tag are all nodes. They live in this document object model, and with CSS and JavaScript, we can reach our hand in. For example, in JavaScript, we can change the data state of a node. Could be its color or its font, maybe even its text. Or we could attach an event handler. For example, I could have a button or an image, and then I attach an on-click event handler to it. Then if somebody clicks on the image, it can swap for another image because the source attribute of the image node has now been changed. So that's all stuff that flows directly out of understanding the nature of a web page as being a graph of nodes, and nodes have data, and they can have state, and they can have events. CSS can change the state, which is the color, the font size, right? So it can change the data state, and then the events can be manipulated by JavaScript. We can drop event handlers onto a node, and we can set up other event handlers to listen to changes in that other node that we're listening to. Anyway, that was most. I'm about 15 minutes into this video now, and this was the major thing that I wanted to show you because my screen capture. Oh, there we go. Yeah, this stuff is perhaps a bit hard. I know in the classroom we have the whiteboard or the chalkboard, right? But sometimes it's harder to sort of convey some of this stuff. So I wanted to make sure that you really understand and even spend a couple of minutes reading through some of the PowerPoints now from the perspective of this stuff we've talked about, and discipline yourself from now on to think. Where'd my other picture go? Well, I'll draw a new one. I don't know where it went, so I'll make a new one. So this course is going to be about studying markup languages. So go and read all your material about what a language is there. And what does markup language do? It manipulates the DOM. That's the purpose. That's going to be an exam question, by the way, a test question. What's the purpose of a markup language? It is a language which has the power, the capacity, because it can work in the browser. And through the browser, it can manipulate this thing called the BOM, Browser Object Model. So the browser object model, imagine if you had like a big boiling pot, like in the old days, you know, in the center of the village or something, they had this big iron kettle and they boiled water, and then they put potatoes and carrots and, I don't know, like corn and different stuff in there. So they put all these ingredients into this boiling water, and then after a while, steam started coming up. So you can contemplate the pot as being like your browser, and you can contemplate these ingredients you're throwing in as being like nodes, right? So nodes are ingredients in the DOM. So the image tag is a node, and the H1 tag is a node, and the P tag is a node, and so on. So all of these nodes go into the browser, and then the steam starts boiling off, and that steam you can consider as being like the browser object model. So the browser object model, this is going to be a final exam question now. It comes from the interaction. It comes from the act of your browser processing a DOM model. So it's an in-memory data representation. This is all in the Word document on the browser object model I gave you in your Blackboard. It's all up there. Oops, that's black. No, I put it in Slack. I put it in. Yes, that's Slack. I put it in Blackboard. Primarily, I'm going to be putting all the materials in Blackboard, and then I'll put a notice up in Slack so you know to go and look for them over there. Yes. So here is your Blackboard. And there's your lecture material tab. And there's your day 1, which is tomorrow. So there's the PowerPoint. I'd like you to go and just scan over it, right? You don't have to study it in depth, but make yourself familiar with it. There is a Word document on the browser object model. I'd like you to go and study that. That's going to be very important. A lot of people, for some reason, I don't know why it is, but maybe it's not emphasized enough in some programs. But here at college, we're very rigorous on making it very academic, because anybody can learn how to use tools. Like you can learn how to use an HTML IDE by watching a YouTube video. But to take a couple of steps back and understand at the sort of theory of language level what's going on, that's the unique benefit you get from this kind of advanced academic training we have here. So go and read this document about the HTML document object model. And here, course notebook, because PowerPoint is great for certain things, but it's not good for large amounts of text. So when I have to convey like a large amount of text, it's going to go into here, so you can go there and read that. So again, just scan over it. Like there's, for example, is a list of all of the HTML tags. Right, so you can go and scan over that. Right, that's going to be our work tomorrow. And of course, the code along workbook, that is a Google Doc. So we're going to be doing about 75 or 80% of our work in class is going to be doing coding. I'm going to strongly encourage you to use, now there's Visual Studio Code there as well. That's going to be quite important. When we get to some JavaScript stuff, it really is the best tool. But I'm going to suggest that just using Sublime Text Editor is the right way to go for at least the next couple of days. So we're going to fire up Sublime. You're going to have your web server, and if you are not able to set it up, I strongly suggest you bring your own device to class, because we cannot install stuff on the classroom machines, right? Can't install a web server, for example. Now, I will have my laptop with my MAMP there. So if anybody is, not able to run their own dev environment, I will set up an FTP server on my machine, and you can FTP your work to my laptop, and then you can view it through my server. And in fact, that's kind of the standard process. If you become a web developer at a company, when you're developing the page, you have a local dev environment on your own machine. But then when you're ready to get it up to production, then you FTP it to the production machine, or depending how well disciplined your environment is, sometimes for corporate regulation reasons, you will FTP your work to what's called the staging server, and then they might have auditors to look over it, make sure all the branding and colors and fonts and all that stuff is correct, and then on their end they'll release it to production. But anyway, that's some of the stuff we can do. So ideally do get, and I gave you instructions to either get the Apache Friends XAMPP product up and going. It's all in your course, your course. Plus, you can always ping me on Slack as well at any point, right? If anybody needs between classes some extra help, You know, we can do like a little Zoom call for a couple of minutes, some little office hours or something. I think it's ApacheFriends.org. There we go. And then you can go and download XAMPP. Now, up until a few months ago, I was running my classes purely on XAMPP, but then some students started upgrading their computer, their laptop to Windows 11. And as of last month, XAMPP did not run on Windows 11. Maybe now it does, I haven't checked. But in any event, what I just did to get around that is to start running things on MAMP. And MAMP is nice. I like it. It's very good. It's actually, you know, it gives you more professional grade features than XAMPP. The only zinger is the price tag. I think after 14 days, you have to pay like $30 or $40 or something to register it. And I've looked into it. I don't think they have an academic discount. But one way or another, we'll get you going up with a server, and we'll help you tomorrow if that becomes necessary to sort of jump in and help people with that. And once again, you're going to be using Sublime, or you could use anything, right? You could use Notepad or something. I think Sublime is the good way to go because it has linting, right? It'll give you intelligent code completion and so on, especially for things like CSS. That's really nice. What am I looking for? There's too much going on in my brain. Sublime, of course, Sublime. So tomorrow, one of our first exercises is going to be to make a simple HTML file. So you're going to start by saving it. And there's some basic skills here as well. Things like working with files and directory system. Some students are not too strong on basic file handling. And if you're not, then we're going to get you to be strong on it pretty fast because you're going to need that here. But just make a dedicated folder so you, especially when you start doing the assignments and stuff, you're going to want to find out where your work is. Some students like to use Git. If you want, I'll show you how to use Git, but it can take a little bit of time to get into it, and our class course outline is pretty tight as it is. So if I have specific requests for, you know, other things like Git, I'll get into them, but otherwise just use your local file system. So we're going to make a file now. And to see, I'm giving an extension of HTML, and I'm going to save it as type HTML. And that is called linting. Because I'm using a programmer's editor, my editor is now going to be able to give me color coding and intelligent code completion. So why I'm showing you this is to just let you know that this is the benefit of a programmer's editor as opposed to just using something like Notepad. Right, so you're always going to start with your opening HTML tag. You're always going to be careful to balance your tags. See, my editor there jumped in and auto-completed that for me. And you're going to have head, and you're going to close head and body, and close body, and so on. And then we're going to go from there. First of all, we're going to create several HTML pages to learn the structuring of HTML. And then we're going to start putting some CSS in there. We're going to view the page through our development server. And then we're going to use the Chromium dev tools, right? So if you go to any web page in Chrome, that's why we want you to use Chrome. You can go to inspect, and then the browser object model will show up over here. And in fact, if you really want to learn good web development, you can go to very professionally designed sites like Disney.com, and you can see what kinds of things they do with their CSS, right? So that lets us get in there and inspect everything, and you can actually make changes there as well. Your BOM is an in-memory data structure, but that shows you your BOM. So you can change things like the color or some of the handlers. You can drop debug points on your document object model breakpoints or your event listeners, right? You can get a console, and then you can go and introspect elements of the DOM, such as the document. See, all stuff you can do once you have a little bit of basic skills here. Anyway, oh, I see. That just means, yeah, because I would have needed to do something else there. But anyway, that's just to show us how we can introspect some of our elements here. See, that shows me all the things that's going on with the window. This video is already now at 30 minutes. I hadn't quite meant it to run this long, but I hope you do take the time to watch it. Maybe just break it up, you know, like 10 minutes at a time or something, 10, 10, 10. It's a lot of information, but this is going to be the starting point of tomorrow's course. So if you have any questions or concerns at any point, you can drop a message, ping me in Slack. You can send me a private email, right? I'll make sure my email is up there in Blackboard. Otherwise, we'll see everybody tomorrow. By the end of tomorrow's class, you're going to learn CSS up to working with grid layouts. That's going to be our goal tomorrow. So anyway, see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.